New Jersey Governor-elect Mikey Sherrill giving voice to what is undoubtedly a bounce-back moment for Democrats in New Jersey. What do I mean by that? Well, 4 years ago, Kamala Harris, as the Democratic nominee for president, underperformed Joe Biden by 400,000 votes. A Truth Social post from President Trump regarding tonight's results.
We do, Major. It's the first time we have heard from the president since the Republican losses, and he is citing unnamed pollsters, saying, quote, Trump wasn't on the ballot and shutdown were the two reasons that Republicans lost elections tonight, which really falls in line with what I heard from Trump senior aides at the White House today, who said, look, off-cycle elections are what they are. We don't view this as a direct referendum.
Okay, so I need you to pay very close attention to what I'm about to tell you, because what Donald Trump just did on Truth Social is absolutely unhinged, and it reveals something deeply troubling about the state of his presidency and his grip on the Republican Party. Trump unleashed a furious tirade against Indiana Senate Republicans, naming specific senators and threatening to primary anyone who dared to defy him on redistricting. He went after Senator Roderick Bray. He went after Senator Greg Goode. He said they disappointed him. He vowed to strongly endorse primary challengers against anyone who resists his demands. This is the President of the United States publicly threatening members of his own party with political destruction because they would not do exactly what he wanted. And what happened next is even more disturbing. At least 11 Indiana Republican officials faced swatting attacks and bomb threats immediately after Trump posted his tirade. 11 elected officials receiving violent threats because the president painted targets on their backs. This is what Trump's America looks like. This is what happens when a president uses social media to direct rage at members of his own party. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust headlines anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Is the exodus has started. We heard about real estate rates. People are looking at leaving the state because of the high taxes that they anticipate coming. So we're going to be able to test both Republicans and Democrats.
Chuck, the floor is yours.
I would push back on my good sister Leslie on two things. There's a Republican governor of Virginia right now. It ain't that blue. And also in New Jersey, just 4 years ago, Democrats only won by 2 points. And this is the first time.
Think about what this post reveals about Trump's mental state and his assessment of his own political situation. When you are secure in your power, when you know your party is unified behind you, you do not need to make public threats against senators from Indiana. You do not need to promise vengeance against anyone who steps out of line. You do not need to throw tantrums on social media because a state legislature did not give you exactly what you wanted. This kind of desperate, threatening behavior comes from weakness, not strength. It comes from a man who feels his control slipping away and is lashing out in panic. Critics are interpreting this outburst as an implicit admission that Trump's iron grip on the Republican Party is finally crumbling. His term's effectiveness is being undermined by internal rebellion that he cannot stop no matter how many threats he makes. The desperation is palpable, and everyone watching can see it clearly. The specific fight that triggered Trump's meltdown involves redistricting in Indiana. Trump wanted an aggressive new map that could potentially net Republicans 2 extra House seats in Congress. He was pushing hard for the Indiana legislature to draw lines that would maximize Republican advantage. But Indiana Senate Republicans pushed back. They did not want to create a map that aggressive. They had their own political considerations. They had their own assessment of what was sustainable and legal. And when they refused to simply do what Trump demanded, he lost it completely. He went on Truth Social and started naming names and making threats. He basically told Indiana Republicans, do what I say or I will destroy your political careers. That is not leadership. That is not persuasion. That is intimidation and bullying from someone who has no other tools left to get what he wants. And here's what makes this story even more significant. This is not an isolated incident. This is part of a broader pattern of GOP fractures deepening across the country as Trump's political dominance wanes. The 2025 off-year elections exposed serious Republican vulnerabilities. Democrats have been winning in places they should not be winning. Special elections that should be easy Republican holds are becoming competitive races where the party has to pour in resources. Trump himself has had to intervene in Tennessee's special House election, a race that should be a layup for Republicans because the party is panicking about their prospects. Retirements are mounting in Texas and Indiana as Republican officials decide they do not want to deal with Trump's chaos anymore. The coalition that carried Trump to victory is showing serious cracks, and Trump's response is to threaten and bully anyone who does not fall in line. The AI policy fight mentioned in the report shows another dimension of these fractures within the party. Trump has been pushing for federal preemption on AI regulation, wanting one federal standard instead of 50 different state regulatory regimes. He is inserting this into NDAA negotiations, despite Republican opposition. Even on policy matters where you would expect party unity, Trump is generating conflict and resistance. His demands alienate allies. His tactics create enemies. His constant need to dominate every situation makes it impossible for Republicans to work together effectively on anything. The result is a party that looks increasingly dysfunctional and divided at the worst possible time. So today, we are going to break all of this down completely. We are going to look at exactly what Trump posted and why it triggered such an extreme response, including violent threats against elected officials. We are going to examine the broader pattern of GOP fractures and what it means for Trump's ability to govern effectively. We are going to talk about the 2026 midterm implications as Republicans face the prospect of a wipeout while their leader alienates more allies every day. And we are going to discuss what this desperate behavior reveals about Trump's own assessment of his political situation. Stay with me here, because this story exposes a presidency in genuine peril. All right, let us get into the details of what actually happened here and why Trump's true social tirade represents such a significant moment in the ongoing collapse of Republican unity. Because the surface story, President threatens senators over redistricting, does not capture just how unhinged this behavior was and what it reveals about the state of Trump's presidency. First, you need to understand the context of the redistricting fight that set Trump off. Every 10 years after the census, states redraw their congressional and legislative district maps. This is an enormously consequential process because the lines determine which party has advantages in future elections. Gerrymandering, drawing lines to maximize partisan advantage, has become increasingly sophisticated and aggressive. And Trump wanted Indiana to create a map that would be extremely favorable to Republicans, potentially netting 2 additional House seats that could help maintain or expand the GOP majority in Congress. But Indiana Senate Republicans had concerns about what Trump was demanding. Creating an extremely aggressive gerrymander carries risks. Courts have struck down maps that go too far. Voters sometimes punish parties that are seen as manipulating democracy too blatantly. And local officials have their own political considerations that do not always align with what the president wants. Senators like Roderick Bray and Greg Good apparently concluded that Trump's preferred map was not the right approach for Indiana. They pushed back. They exercised their own judgment as elected officials representing their constituents. And that was enough to trigger a presidential meltdown on social media. Trump went on Truth Social on November 16th and started attacking these senators by name. He said they disappointed him. He promised to strongly endorse primary challengers against them and anyone else who resisted his demands. He essentially told the entire Indiana Republican establishment, obey me or face destruction. The immediate aftermath of Trump's post was horrifying and entirely predictable. At least 11 Indiana Republican officials faced swatting attacks and bomb threats after Trump named names and directed his followers' rage at specific targets. Swatting is when someone makes a false emergency report to send armed police to a victim's home. It is extremely dangerous and has resulted in deaths. Bomb threats force evacuations and create genuine fear for safety. These are not abstract political consequences. These are real violent threats against real people and their families. And they happen because the President of the United States decided to use his massive platform to paint targets on the backs of members of his own party who did not do exactly what he wanted. Trump knows what happens when he attacks people publicly. He knows his followers take action. He knows threats and violence follow his posts. And he does it anyway because he cares more about getting his way than about the safety of the people he attacks. The pattern here connects to a broader crisis within the Republican Party as Trump's political dominance shows signs of waning. The 2025 off-year elections crystallized the GOP's post-Trump problem in ways that have party strategists deeply worried. Democrats have been performing better than expected across the country. Special elections that should be routine Republican victories have become competitive fights requiring major resource investments. The Tennessee House special election, which should be an easy hold for Republicans in a deep red district, has turned into a must-win battle where Trump himself has had to campaign because the party is panicking. When a former president has to personally intervene in a district that voted for him by massive margins, something is seriously wrong with that party's political standing. Republican retirements are accelerating in ways that compound these problems. When experienced incumbents decide not to run for re-election, it creates open seat races that are much harder to hold than incumbent defenses. Texas has seen notable retirements. Indiana has seen retirements. Across the country, Republican officials are looking at the chaos Trump creates and deciding they do not want to deal with it anymore. They are getting out while they can rather than facing brutal primaries or general elections defined by Trump's dysfunction. Each retirement makes the 2026 map harder for Republicans. Each departure represents someone who concluded that the Trump era of Republican politics is not worth enduring any longer. Trump's threats against Indiana Republicans expose a fundamental weakness in his political position. When you have to threaten people to maintain loyalty, you do not actually have loyalty. You have fear, and fear only works as long as you maintain the credibility of your threats. But Trump is already stretched thin. He is already fighting on multiple fronts. He is already dealing with legal troubles and policy failures and economic problems. How many primary challenges can he actually support? How many political vendettas can he actually pursue? At some point, Republican officials will calculate that Trump's threats are empty because he cannot possibly follow through on all of them. And when that happens, the dam breaks completely. People stop fearing him. They start ignoring him. His power evaporates. And we may be approaching that tipping point based on the increasing willingness of Republicans to defy him publicly. The AI policy dispute mentioned in the report shows that these fractures extend beyond just redistricting and electoral politics. Trump has been pushing for federal preemption on artificial intelligence regulation, wanting a single national standard rather than letting states create their own rules. This is a significant policy debate with real implications for the technology industry and for state authority, and Trump is creating conflict within his own party over it. Republicans who believe in states' rights are uncomfortable with federal preemption. Republicans who represent states with their own AI initiatives are protective of their regulatory autonomy. Trump is inserting himself into NDAA negotiations in ways that generate opposition from members of his own party. Even when there are legitimate policy discussions to be had, Trump turns them into loyalty tests and creates unnecessary enemies. The broader 2026 midterm picture looks increasingly ominous for Republicans as Trump's behavior alienates more allies while energizing Democratic opposition. The House majority is extremely narrow. Republicans can only afford to lose a handful of seats before losing control entirely. And Trump is actively working against his own party's interests by creating internal divisions and external liabilities. Every time he threatens Republican senators, he makes it harder for the party to project unity. Every time his posts trigger violent threats against officials, he reminds voters of the chaos he brings. Every time he demands total obedience and punishes dissent, he drives away the independent voters Republicans need to win competitive districts. Democrats are watching all of this and exploiting the fractures aggressively. They are recruiting strong candidates in districts that suddenly look winnable. They are raising money off Trump's dysfunction. They are framing the election as a choice between chaos and competence. And Republicans, rather than presenting a unified front to counter this narrative, are fighting among themselves because their leader cannot tolerate any deviation from his demands. Trump is making the Democrats' job easier by tearing his own coalition apart. He is handing them ammunition daily through his unhinged social media posts, and he seems completely incapable of understanding that his behavior is destroying the very political coalition he needs to maintain power. The desperation evident in Trump's threats reveals his own assessment of his political situation. Presidents who feel secure in their power do not behave this way. Presidents who have genuine party loyalty do not need to threaten senators over redistricting. Presidents who believe they are governing effectively do not lash out at allies constantly over minor disagreements. Trump's behavior screams insecurity and panic. He feels his control slipping away. He sees the fractures deepening. He knows the polls are not good and the political environment is deteriorating. And his response is to double down on the only tool he knows, threats and intimidation. But that tool is losing its effectiveness as more Republicans calculate that defying Trump is survivable and maybe even beneficial for their own political futures. Okay, so let us break this down into the key points you need to understand about Trump's meltdown and what it means for the Republican Party and for his presidency. Because there is a lot happening here, and I want to make sure you walk away with a clear picture of the significance of what we are witnessing. The fractures within the GOP are deepening rapidly, and Trump's response is making everything worse rather than better. Point number 1. Trump publicly threatened Indiana Senate Republicans by name for refusing his redistricting demands. On November 16th, he went on Truth Social and attacked Senators Roderick Bray and Greg Good specifically. He said they disappointed him. He promised to strongly endorse primary challengers against anyone who resists his demands. This is the President of the United States threatening members of his own party with political destruction because they exercise independent judgment on a state legislative matter. This is not leadership or persuasion. This is bullying and intimidation from someone who has no other tools left to get what he wants from people who should be his allies. Point number 2, at least 11 Indiana Republican officials faced swatting attacks and bomb threats immediately after Trump's post went up. This is the direct and predictable consequence of Trump naming names and directing rage at specific targets. Swatting is dangerous and has resulted in deaths. Bomb threats create genuine fear for safety. These are real violent threats against real people and their families. Trump knows this happens when he attacks people publicly. He knows his followers take action based on his posts. and he does it anyway, because getting his way matters more to him than the safety of the people he targets. Point number 3. This outburst is part of a broader pattern of GOP fractures, deepening as Trump's political dominance wanes. The 2025 off-year elections exposed serious Republican vulnerabilities across the country. Democrats have been winning races they should not be winning. Special elections that should be easy Republican holds have become competitive battles requiring major resource investments. Trump himself has had to personally intervene in Tennessee's special House election, a race that should be a layup in deep red territory. When the former president has to campaign in a district that voted for him by massive margins, something is seriously wrong. Point number 4, Republican retirements are accelerating as officials decide they do not want to deal with Trump's chaos anymore. Texas and Indiana have both seen notable retirements that create open seat races harder to defend. Experienced incumbents are looking at the environment Trump creates and concluding it is not worth enduring any longer. Each retirement makes the 2026 map harder for Republicans. Each departure represents someone who calculated that the Trump era of Republican politics has become more trouble than it is worth. This is not a sign of a healthy party or a leader with firm control. Point number 5, Trump's threats expose fundamental weakness rather than strength. When you have to threaten people to maintain loyalty, you do not actually have loyalty, you have fear. And fear only works as long as your threats remain credible, but Trump is stretched thin across multiple political and legal battles. He cannot possibly follow through on every primary challenge he threatens. At some point, Republican officials will calculate that his threats are empty and stop fearing him. We may be approaching that tipping point based on increasing willingness of Republicans to publicly defy his demands despite the threats. Point number 6. The AI policy dispute shows these fractures extend beyond electoral politics into substantive policy disagreements. Trump is pushing for federal preemption on AI regulation, one national standard instead of 50 state regimes. This is generating opposition from Republicans who believe in states' rights and from those representing states with their own AI initiatives. Even on legitimate policy questions, Trump turns everything into loyalty tests and creates unnecessary conflicts with people who should be working with him. Point number 7. The 2026 midterm picture looks increasingly ominous for Republicans as Trump alienates allies while energizing Democrats. The House majority is razor thin. Republicans can only afford to lose a handful of seats, and Trump is actively working against his own party's interests by creating internal divisions and external liabilities. Every threatening post makes unity harder. Every violent consequence reminds voters of the chaos Trump brings. Democrats are exploiting these fractures aggressively, recruiting strong candidates and raising money off Trump's dysfunction. Point number 8. The desperation in Trump's behavior reveals his own assessment of his political situation. Presidents who feel secure do not threaten senators over redistricting. Presidents with genuine party loyalty do not need to bully allies constantly. Presidents governing effectively do not lash out at every minor disagreement. Trump's behavior screams insecurity and panic. He feels his control slipping away. He sees the fractures deepening. He knows the political environment is deteriorating. And his only response is more threats and more intimidation, tools that are losing their effectiveness as more Republicans calculate that defying Trump is survivable. So where does all of this leave us as we watch the Republican Party fracture in real time? We have got Trump publicly threatening senators by name and promising political destruction to anyone who defies him. We have got 11 Republican officials receiving violent threats, including swatting and bomb threats as a direct result of Trump's posts. We have got 2025 election results exposing serious Republican vulnerabilities across the country. We have got accelerating retirements as officials decide Trump's chaos is not worth enduring. We have got threats that reveal weakness rather than strength as Trump's credibility to follow through diminishes. We have got policy disputes generating conflict even among natural allies. We have got an ominous 2026 outlook as the narrow House majority faces serious jeopardy. And we have got desperate presidential behavior that suggests Trump himself knows his grip on power is slipping away. Critics are interpreting this outburst as an implicit admission that Trump's iron grip and potentially his term's effectiveness is crumbling under internal rebellion. That interpretation makes sense when you look at the pattern. Secure leaders do not behave this way. Confident presidents do not threaten their own party members over state redistricting fights. People in control do not lash out constantly at everyone who fails to obey perfectly. Trump is acting like someone who knows the walls are closing in. He is acting like someone who sees his coalition fracturing and has no idea how to stop it. He is acting like someone whose political instincts are failing him at the worst possible moment. The implications for 2026 could not be more serious for Republicans. Trump is their leader. His name and his brand define the party. And he is systematically destroying relationships with officials across the country through his threatening behavior. He is creating enemies within his own coalition He is generating negative headlines that remind voters of everything they dislike about him. He is energizing Democratic opposition while demoralizing Republican officials who have to deal with his chaos. And he shows no capacity to change course or moderate his behavior, even when it is clearly counterproductive to his own interests. Democrats are watching this unfold with barely concealed delight. Every internal Republican fight is an opportunity for them. Every threatening Trump post is material for advertisements. Every violent consequence of Trump's rhetoric reinforces their narrative about the danger he represents. They do not have to attack Republicans. They just have to point at what Trump is doing and let voters draw their own conclusions. The chaos is self-evident. The fractures are visible to everyone. And Trump keeps making it worse day after day with posts that alienate allies and empower opponents. Hit that subscribe button because you are going to want to be here as this story continues to develop. The GOP fractures are deepening and Trump's threats are accelerating. The 2026 midterms are coming and Republicans are in serious trouble. Indiana's redistricting fight is just one example of the broader rebellion brewing within the party. And Trump's desperate threatening behavior reveals a president who knows his grip on power is slipping away even if he cannot admit it publicly. The walls are closing in, the coalition is cracking, and Trump is making everything worse through his own unhinged conduct. Until next time.